I remember the exact moment the world shifted into lockdown. March 2020. Portland was quiet in a way I'd never experienced, like the city was holding its breath. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an older building near Hawthorne, the kind of place with thin walls and neighbors you heard but rarely saw. By day 4 of isolation, I'd fallen into a strange rhythm working from my kitchen table, microwaving leftovers, staring at my phone too much, feeling the hours blur together. That's when I found the notice. I'd gone to take out the trash, and when I came back, there it was, a piece of paper, crisp and white, slipped under my door. At first, I assumed it was just another flyer or memo from the building manager about package protocols. But when I picked it up, my stomach tightened. The header read, Portland City Health Department, in bold letters, with an official-looking seal in the corner. Below that, in smaller text, Mandatory Enhanced Quarantine Notification. I read it twice, my hands starting to tremble. According to the notice, my unit, 3B had been flagged due to a confirmed COVID-19 exposure within the building. I was instructed not to open my door under any circumstances and to await further contact from health officials within 72 hours. A phone number was listed at the bottom for questions. I felt a spike of panic. Had someone in my building tested positive? Why hadn't the manager sent an email? I pulled out my phone and dialed the number immediately. It rang, once a hollow, distant sound, and then disconnected. I tried again. Same thing. The line just went dead. Over the next 3 days, I stayed inside, obsessively checking my email and phone for follow-up instructions that never came. I barely slept. I kept replaying the notice in my mind, studying every word. On the second night, I started hearing footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, the kind of footsteps that weren't just passing by. They'd approach my door, stop directly in front of it, and linger. I timed it once exactly 2 minutes. Then they'd move on, fading down the hall toward the stairwell. It happened again on the third night. And the fourth. By the sixth night, I was barely holding it together. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just a neighbor getting late-night snacks or checking their mail. But the footsteps came again, right on schedule, slow, purposeful, stopping outside my door. And then I heard something that made my blood freeze. The doorknob started to turn. It wasn't a quick jiggle, like someone checking the wrong apartment. It was slow, methodical, testing the lock with patience. I watched from my bed as the knob twisted back and forth in the dim light filtering through my window. My heart hammered so hard I thought whoever was out there might hear it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. For 10 minutes, the doorknob turned and released, as if someone was learning the mechanism, figuring out how much pressure it could take. Then it stopped. The footsteps retreated. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened my laptop and went to our building's group chat, a thread mostly used for noise complaints and lost package questions. I typed out a message, trying to keep my voice calm. Did anyone else get a quarantine notice slipped under their door? The responses came quickly. No. Nothing. What notice? I felt my chest tighten. I asked if anyone had heard about a confirmed case in the building. Again, no. One neighbor even joked that if there'd been a case, our manager would have sent 15 panic emails by now. I sat there staring at my screen, a sick realization creeping over me. I grabbed my phone and Googled the Portland Health Department's actual contact number. When someone answered, I explained the situation, the notice, the number that wouldn't connect, the instructions to stay inside. There was a pause on the other end. Then the representative said something that made my skin crawl. We don't send printed notices. All our quarantine communications are digital emails and phone calls only. I pulled the notice off my bulletin board where I'd pinned it and looked at it again under the kitchen light. The city seal was slightly off-center. The font was inconsistent Arial in some places, Times New Roman in others. The phone number didn't match the format of any official city line. Someone had made this. Someone had designed a fake quarantine notice, printed it, and slipped it under my door. And then they'd come back, night after night, testing to see if I'd followed the instruction, testing to see if I'd stay inside, testing my lock. I called the police and filed a report. They took notes, told me to keep my door locked, and said they'd increase patrols in the area. but I could tell they didn't know what to make of it. Neither did I. I moved out 5 weeks later. I never found out who left that notice or why they chose me. But sometimes, late at night in my new place across town, I still hear footsteps in the hallway. And I still check the locks. By October 2020, I thought I'd mastered remote teaching. I was a high school English teacher in Austin, and after 7 months of virtual classes, I had the routine down to muscle memory: log in, take attendance, teach, end meeting, close laptop. It was exhausting and isolating, but it was predictable. That predictability was the only thing keeping me sane. On a Thursday afternoon, I wrapped up my last class of the day, a discussion on Macbeth with my junior students. 16 tiny boxes on my screen, most with cameras off, a few half-engaged faces staring back. When the bell rang, I said goodbye, clicked end meeting for all, and snapped my laptop shut with relief. I made dinner, watched an episode of something forgettable, and tried to unwind. 3 hours later, I opened my laptop to start grading essays. The screen lit up, and my stomach dropped. Zoom was still running. The meeting hadn't ended. In the top corner, a small recording indicator blinked red. The timer read 3 hours and 47 minutes. My camera had been on the entire time. I stared at the tiny video feed of myself, or rather, the empty chair where I'd been sitting. My desk lamp still on, the hallway behind me visible in the frame. I felt my throat tighten. How had this happened? I always ended meetings. Always. Then I looked at the participant list. My breath caught. There was one other person still in the meeting. Observer 057. No profile picture. Camera off. Microphone off. They'd been there the entire time. Watching an empty room. Watching my apartment. My hands shook as I clicked end meeting again. This time holding the button down as if that would make it more final. The window closed. I immediately went to my Zoom recordings in the cloud, desperate to see what had been captured, to know what this person had seen, but the file wasn't there. The recording list was empty. Either it had never uploaded, or someone had deleted it. I changed my password that night, enabled two-factor authentication, ran a virus scan, checked every privacy setting. I told myself it was a glitch, some weird Zoom bug caused by my terrible internet or a software update. But it happened again 4 days later. I finished my morning class, ended the meeting, closed my laptop, and went for a walk around my neighborhood, trying to clear my head. When I got back an hour later and opened my computer, Zoom was running. Observer 057 was there. Recording time, 1 hour and 34 minutes. I felt panic rising in my chest. I stopped the meeting, restarted my computer, checked my account activity logs. Nothing suspicious. No unauthorized logins. No one else had access to my account. It didn't make sense. The third time it happened, I was ready. I finished my afternoon class, clicked end meeting, but this time I didn't close my laptop. I waited, staring at the screen. For 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Zoom reopened on its own. The meeting window reappeared, and Observer 057 joined 10 seconds later. I grabbed my phone and started recording the screen, my hands trembling. I wanted proof. I let it run for 5 minutes, then forced the application to quit and downloaded the Zoom recording file before it could disappear. This time, I got it. 23 minutes of footage, saved locally on my hard drive. I opened the video file, my heart pounding. The footage showed exactly what I expected: my empty desk, the lamp, the hallway. But as I scrubbed through the timeline, I noticed something in the background, a reflection in the window behind my desk. It was dark outside in the recording, and the glass acted like a mirror. At first, I thought it was just my own reflection from earlier, but then I paused the video at the 4-minute mark. There was a face, not mine, someone standing in the hallway of my apartment, just out of the camera's direct line of sight, barely visible in the darkened glass. They were watching me teach, watching the empty room afterward, standing perfectly still. I felt ice flood my veins. Observer 057 wasn't some hacker accessing my Zoom from across the internet. They'd been inside my apartment. They'd been in my home while I taught, standing in the shadows of my hallway, and somehow they'd synchronized their Zoom presence to match. I called the police immediately. They came, took a report, checked my apartment for signs of forced entry. Nothing. My landlord changed the locks the next day. I bought a camera for my front door and started checking every closet, every window, every lock, obsessively before bed. I never saw Observer 57 inches another meeting again. But I also never felt safe in that apartment. I broke my lease 2 months later and moved in with my sister across town. I still teach online, but I never use Zoom anymore, and I keep my laptop camera covered, always. Because sometimes, late at night, I still wonder how long had they been watching before I finally noticed. April 2020 was a blur of online orders. Groceries, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, everything came in cardboard boxes left at my apartment door in Seattle. I barely kept track anymore, so when the first unmarked package appeared on my doorstep on a Tuesday morning, I didn't think twice. I brought it inside, assuming it was something I'd ordered late at night and forgotten about. Inside was a phone charger, a simple white iPhone cable, still in plastic packaging. I frowned. I didn't remember ordering this, but my current charger had been fraying badly, and I'd been meaning to replace it, so I shrugged it off. Maybe I'd ordered it half asleep during one of my endless doom-scrolling sessions. 2 days later, another package, batteries, a pack of AA Duracells. Again, no packing slip, no return address, just my name and address printed on a plain white label. I checked my bank statements obsessively that night. No unusual charges. I called Amazon customer service. They had no record of any recent deliveries to my address beyond the groceries I'd actually ordered. The packages kept coming. A kitchen sponge, a replacement air filter, a book I'd added to my Goodreads want-to-read list but never purchased. Each item was something I needed, something I'd thought about buying, but hadn't. I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. How could someone know what I needed? I lived alone. I didn't share my Amazon account with anyone. I covered my laptop camera with tape, checked every corner of my apartment for hidden devices, found nothing. Then the items got more specific. A box of chamomile tea, not just any brand, but the exact organic loose-leaf kind I'd Googled at 2 a.m. one sleepless night. The search buried in my browser history. I never bought it, but now it was sitting on my counter, delivered in an unmarked box. I felt my skin crawl. I went through my digital life with paranoia I didn't know I had, changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication on everything, ran malware scans, checked my phone for spyware. Nothing. On week 3, I came home from a rare grocery store trip to find another package waiting. Smaller this time, the size of a photograph mailer. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a printed picture. Color. High resolution. It showed me sitting on my couch the previous night, watching TV in my pajamas. The angle was from outside, across the street, shot through my living room window. I was perfectly centered in the frame, unaware, lit by the glow of the television. Paper-clipped to the photo was a handwritten note in careful, blocky letters. "You're welcome for the batteries. You'll need them soon." I dropped the picture like it was burning. My breath came in short gasps. Someone had been watching me. Someone had been standing outside my building, photographing me through the window, tracking my needs, my searches, my late-night thoughts, and they were still out there. I called 911. 2 officers came to my apartment, examined the photo, took the note as evidence. They filed a report, checked the perimeter of my building, found no signs of forced entry or surveillance equipment. They told me to keep my curtains closed and to call if anything else happened, but I could see it in their eyes they didn't know what to do with this. Neither did I. The packages stopped after that. No more deliveries. No more unmarked boxes. For 2 weeks, nothing. I started to breathe a little easier. I told myself maybe the police visit had scared them off. Maybe it was over. Then, on a Saturday night, a spring thunderstorm rolled through Seattle. The power went out around 9 p.m., plunging my apartment into complete darkness. I fumbled for my phone, used the flashlight to navigate to my kitchen drawer where I kept a backup flashlight. I found it, clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, and then I remembered. The batteries inside were the ones from that unmarked delivery 3 weeks ago. The Duracells, the ones I hadn't ordered. I stood there frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. From somewhere below me, I heard the building's front door open. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow. Deliberate. Climbing. I turned off the flashlight and stood in the darkness, my heart hammering, listening to the footsteps rise floor by floor. They stopped on my floor. I heard them move down the hallway, past other apartments, stopping outside my door. A long silence. Then 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood there in the dark, holding the flashlight they'd given me, and waited. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. The stairwell door opened and closed. The power came back on 20 minutes later. I packed a bag that night and stayed with a friend. I broke my lease the following week and moved to a different neighborhood. I never found out who was sending those packages or how they knew so much about me. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that note. You'll need them soon. Like they knew the storm was coming. Like they'd planned the whole thing. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the door. In late March 2020, something beautiful started happening in my Chicago neighborhood. Every evening at 8 p.m., people would step out onto their balconies and clap a collective thank you to healthcare workers risking their lives during the pandemic. It echoed between the buildings, this brief moment of connection, when everything else felt fractured and terrifying. I lived on the 4th floor of a brick apartment building in Wicker Park, and every night I'd walk out to my small balcony, look down at the street, and join the applause. It felt good. Hopeful. Human. After about 2 weeks, I started noticing something odd. The clapping from the unit directly below me, 3C, continued long after everyone else stopped. While the neighborhood's applause faded after 30 seconds, maybe a minute, the clapping below me went on. And on. 5 minutes. 10, sometimes 15. It wasn't enthusiastic clapping either. It was slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Clap, clap, clap. Always the same tempo, like a metronome. I'd stand on my balcony, listening to it echo up from below, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Why would someone clap alone for that long? I convinced myself it was echoing from another building, bouncing off the brick and concrete in strange ways. Sound did weird things in the city. But one afternoon, I ran into my downstairs neighbor, Sarah, in the building's small lobby. We kept our distance, masks on, and made awkward small talk. I mentioned the 8 p.m. clapping, said something about how nice it was that she participated so enthusiastically. She looked at me, confused. "I haven't been doing that," she said. "I work night shifts at a warehouse. I'm always asleep at 8. I felt a chill run through me despite the warm spring air. "You're sure?" I asked. "Positive. I'm never home at that time." I nodded, tried to smile behind my mask, and headed back upstairs. My mind raced. If Sarah wasn't clapping, then where was the sound coming from? That night, I stood on my balcony at 8 p.m. and listened carefully. The neighborhood clapped, the sound swelling and fading like a wave. And then, as the silence returned, I heard it. Slow, deliberate clapping, coming unmistakably from directly below me, from inside Sarah's apartment. I went inside immediately, locked my sliding glass door, and closed the curtains. My hands were shaking. For the next 3 nights, I ignored the ritual entirely. I stayed inside with the lights off, curtains drawn, trying to pretend I couldn't hear it. But every night at 8 p.m., the clapping started below me, slow and steady and cold, even when I didn't participate, even when no one else was clapping. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. At 7:55 p.m., I went downstairs and stood outside Sarah's door, my heart pounding so hard I felt lightheaded. At exactly 8 p.m., I knocked. Sarah answered almost immediately, looking exhausted. She was dressed in her warehouse uniform, a jacket in her hand, clearly about to leave for her night shift. "Hey," she said, surprised to see me. "Everything okay?" I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. "This is going to sound strange," I started. "But has anyone else been in your apartment? Does anyone else have a key?" She frowned. "No. Why?" I opened my mouth to answer, and that's when it started. From somewhere inside her apartment, past the small entryway, Past the kitchen, I could barely see, slow, deliberate clapping. Clap, clap, clap. Sarah's face went white. She heard it too. We stood there, frozen, staring at each other as the clapping continued, echoing from somewhere deep inside her apartment. She lived alone. The door had been locked. No one else was supposed to be there. "What the fuck?" she whispered. The clapping didn't stop. It continued, rhythmic and patient, coming from what I assumed was her bedroom or bathroom, somewhere out of sight. Sarah took a step back into her apartment, and I saw fear flash across her face. "I need to call the police," she said, her voice shaking. "Do you want me to wait with you?" I asked, though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. She shook her head. "Just go. I'll call you if—" She didn't finish the sentence. She just closed the door, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. The clapping continued, muffled now, but still audible through the door. I went back upstairs to my apartment, locked every lock, and called Sarah's number. She didn't answer. 20 minutes later, I heard sirens. I looked out my window and saw 2 police cars pull up outside our building. Officers went inside. I waited, staring at my door, my phone clutched in my hand. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "They didn't find anyone. Checked everywhere. I'm staying at my sister's tonight." I texted back, asking if she was okay. She didn't respond. The next morning, I worked up the courage to go downstairs and knock on her door again. No answer. I tried texting. Nothing. I asked the building manager if he'd heard from her. He said she'd requested to break her lease early and moved out over the weekend. I never saw Sarah again, and I never participated in the 8 p.m. clapping after that. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear it, slow and deliberate, coming from the empty apartment below me. Clap, 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 always at 8 p.m., always alone. I moved into a small studio apartment in Brooklyn in early March 2020, just days before the city locked down. The building was old, narrow, with uneven floors and radiators that clanked through the night. My floor had only 2 units, mine and the one across the hall, occupied by an older man named Carl. We'd exchanged pleasantries twice in passing. He was polite, soft-spoken, always wearing the same red flannel shirt. He told me he'd lived there for 15 years, kept to himself, liked the quiet. During the first month of lockdown, I'd see him occasionally through my peephole when I heard his door open. He moved slowly, shuffling toward the stairwell with a canvas grocery bag, then returning an hour later. I felt a strange comfort knowing someone else was nearby, that I wasn't entirely alone in the building. But in mid-April, I realized I hadn't seen Carl in over 2 weeks. His door hadn't opened, no footsteps in the hall, no sounds from across the way. At first, I told myself he'd probably left the city to stay with family, like so many others had. But something felt wrong. I couldn't articulate it, just a low hum of unease in the back of my mind. Then I noticed the newspapers. They were piling up outside his door, visible through my peephole, stacked higher each day, yellowing at the edges. I counted them one morning. 17 papers, over 2 weeks' worth. On week 3, a smell started seeping into the hallway. Faint at first, like old garbage or rotting food, but it grew stronger, thicker, unmistakable. I felt my stomach turn every time I opened my door. I called the building supervisor, an older man named Eddie who lived on the first floor. I explained the situation, the newspapers, the smell, the silence from Carl's apartment. Eddie sighed. "I can't do wellness checks during lockdown," he said. "Not without explicit cause. City rules. If you're really worried, call the police." I didn't want to overreact. What if Carl had just left in a hurry and forgotten to stop his newspaper delivery? What if the smell was from the alley outside? But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at my door, imagining Carl on the other side of the wall, alone, maybe hurt or worse. The thought made me sick. At 3 a.m., I heard a sound that made my heart stop, the creak of a door opening. Carl's door. I crept to my peephole and looked out into the dim hallway, lit only by a single flickering bulb. Carl was standing there, in his red flannel shirt, exactly as I remembered him, but he wasn't moving. He was facing my door directly, perfectly still, his arms at his sides. I watched, my breath fogging the peephole, as he stood there for 4 full minutes without moving a muscle. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into his apartment. The door closed softly behind him. I backed away from the peephole, my mind racing. He was alive. He was fine. The newspapers. The smell, it must have been something else. I was being paranoid. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I checked the hallway through the peephole. The newspapers were gone. The smell was gone. It was like nothing had ever happened. For 5 more days, I saw Carl in the hallway at random times, early morning, late afternoon, the middle of the night, always standing there, always facing my door, never knocking, never speaking, just standing, watching. I stopped looking after the 3rd time. I kept my peephole covered with a piece of tape and tried to pretend he wasn't there. But on the 6th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront this. I waited until I heard his door open. Then I ripped the tape off my peephole and looked. He was there, standing in the hallway in his red flannel shirt. I took a breath, unlocked my door, and pulled it open. Carl turned his head slowly toward me. Up close, I could see details I'd missed through the peephole. His skin was gray, waxy, like old candle wax left in the sun. His eyes were clouded over, milky white, unseeing. His lips were cracked and colorless. He smiled. It was a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for checking on me," he said. His voice was like gravel scraping against concrete, dry and hollow. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at him, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Carl turned away from me, still smiling, and walked back into his apartment. The door closed with a soft click. I slammed my door shut, locked every lock, and called my parents. I packed a bag that night and stayed on their couch in New Jersey for 2 days. When I finally worked up the courage to call Eddie, the building supervisor, I demanded he check Carl's apartment immediately. Eddie called me back an hour later. I could hear the irritation in his voice. "There's no one in that unit," he said. "It's been vacant since January. No one named Carl has ever lived there. I don't know who you've been seeing, but that apartment is empty." I moved out 2 days later. I broke my lease, lost my deposit, and found a new place in Queens with a roommate. I never went back to that building, but sometimes, late at night, I still see him in my mind standing in that hallway, smiling, thanking me for checking on him. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd never opened my door.